Hello and welcome. I am Ladi Akeredoluale. Tonight, court sentences to death 3 of the men accused of killing 4 University of Port Harcourt students at Alu Community River State in 2012. Report from State Department in the U.S. expresses concern over what it describes as Nigeria's military's inability to secure territories recovered from Boko Haram. Defense headquarters rejects this assessment. University of Maiduguri vows to continue oil exploration work in the Lake Chad area in spite of terror attacks, just as ASU threatens strike over lecturers kidnapped by the insurgents. And 8 days to Kenya's general elections, the manager of the country's electoral commission is dead. And on business news tonight, Nigeria's Minister of State for Petroleum Resources warns of possible halt in crude oil production if costs remain high.
On sports news, French city of Paris poised to host 2024 Olympic Games as Los Angeles decides to wait another 4 years to host the multi-sport event.
And from Abuja, Pan-Niger Delta Forum asks federal government to fulfill promises made to the region by the acting president.
We begin tonight with the sentencing of 3 persons to death for their alleged involvement in the murder of the famous Alu 4. It took the Federal High Court in Port Harcourt River State 5 years to finally deliver judgment in the murder trial and also convict 3 of the 12 accused persons. The Alu 4 had been the students of the University of Port Harcourt who were lynched in October 2012 by a mob. But the trial judge, Justice Later Mnyode, is not convinced with the claims of jungle justice and has found only 3 persons guilty of the deaths. The judge, however, discharged the 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th defendants on the grounds that the prosecution team failed to prove its case against them. The 4 boys, Ugonna Obuzo, Toku Lloyd, Chiadika Beringa and Tekena Elkanah, were lynched after they were accused of stealing from a woman who was reportedly owing them some amount of money. They were stripped, severely beaten, and then burned to death. The U.S. Department of State is worried about Nigeria's inability to effectively secure and hold on to territories recaptured from Boko Haram terrorists. In its 2016 report on terrorism submitted to the U.S. Congress, the Department of State says in spite of the successes recorded by the multinational Joint Task Force, the military still suffered some setbacks. The report indicates that the federal government's progress report on the fight against terror is merely a duplication of failed efforts carried over from the end of last year's fighting season. It says the Nigerian government has not been able to rebuild civilian structures and institutions in the areas captured, just as it has not been able to secure the remaining Chibok schoolgirls abducted in 2014 released. The report also accuses the federal government of not having a concrete plan to properly provide adequate security for internally displaced persons. The U.S. Department of State did not only point out some of the failures of the Nigerian government and military in the fight against terror in the northeast, it also highlighted some gains. It noted the government's efforts in negotiating the release of 21 abducted Chibok girls, as well as efforts to increase counter-terrorism operations with the multinational Joint Task Force. It also recognized efforts by government to set up institutions through partnership with donors to coordinate the reconstruction of areas destroyed by the terrorists. The U.S. Department of State in the report says it has been working closely with Nigeria's security agencies to solve some of the problems highlighted. The annual report is submitted to the U.S. Congress in compliance with the Title 22 of the U.S. Code. Meanwhile, the Nigerian Army Director of Public Relations disagrees with the report from the U.S. Department of State. Major General John Enenche says the content of the report submitted to the U.S. Congress is misleading and does not portray the reality of things in Nigeria's fight against insurgents in the north.
I'm sorry to say that this is not the first time I'm hearing from it. The same people say we cannot contain Boko Haram. The same people. I'm sorry to say that I'm not even supposed to say join issues here with such a report. It's an opinion of the United States military. It is not real. What is it, an issue of the deliberate operation they are talking about? No. I'm a military man. I fought there, and I know what I'm talking about. This is not a deliberate operation. The one they did with impunity before 2015. Is that what they are doing now? What is ambush? You conceal yourself. You pass through people. You hide your weapons. You waylay them. That is it. The nature of these operations now, these things happening now, are information bound strongly. And I still want to state that there are informants, there are still fifth columnists, there are still collaborators who are collaborating. Otherwise, now, how come they did not attack them at the first day when they started the exploration exercise with the soldiers? When they have finished and they are going back. So they hadn't was to say, look, we must strike. And somebody gave them information, must have monitored them to ensure that they came to a place where they can easily be ambushed unsuspecting. That is it. So one cannot really say that, look, I mean, the armed forces, or they are not, on top of the situation. But this is a stage of it that they need to be clearing. But the pockets of attacks we're having here and there, like I said, are based strongly on information from their collaborators, who are still amongst us.
Major General John Enenche, Director of Army Public Relations. Well, there's so much to talk about regarding how Nigeria is fighting Boko Haram insurgents in the northeast. As it stands, a lot of efforts have been put into the battle, an appreciable level of success recorded, and then a couple of steps back, especially as indicated in the most recent report from the U.S. Department of State. Let's take a look at how this phenomenon has unfolded.
Although degraded, Boko Haram continued an asymmetric campaign of kidnappings, killings, bombings on civilian and military targets throughout northeast Nigeria. The U.S. State Department. This assessment is called from a report on Nigeria's campaign against Boko Haram in the northeast from the U.S. State Department, released in July. In the report, which is based on the year 2016, the U.S. notes that Nigeria took steps to increase its efforts against Boko Haram. But it appears to pose the question, can the gains be consolidated? Boko Haram began wreaking havoc in the northeastern part of the country after a violent uprising in July 2009 was followed by a mass prison break in Maiduguri, Borno State in September 2010, masterminded by its members following the killing of the group's leader, Mohammed Yusuf, by security forces. Things got worse in 2011 with suicide bombings. In 2013, the government declared a state of emergency in Yobe, Adamawa and Borno states, and the full complement of the armed forces began waging war against the insurgents. The terrorists also resorted to kidnappings, including that of the 276 Chibok girls in April 2014. Boko Haram gained control of territories in and around Borno State in mid-2014. However, the military ramped up the war against the sect, and by March 2015, the Director of Information at Defense Headquarters, Colonel Rabi Abubakar, announced that all known Boko Haram camps and cells had been decimated. The recent upsurge in violence by the terror group is raising more concerns, compelling the acting president, Yemi Osinbajo, to have the service chiefs return to the command center in Borno State, particularly in the aftermath of the recent attack on oil exploration workers in the troubled Borno State.
Well, I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by a national security analyst, Mr. Wale Olumide. Thanks for joining us on the news at 10. Thank you very much. Now, let's start from the most recent thing, this U.S. State Department report, which talks about the activities of the military against the insurgents in 2016. What do you make of the back and forth? I mean, the U.S. government saying, look, this is not enough. The Nigerian military saying, well, you don't have the facts right.
Basically, if you read through the report properly, my first appreciation there is that it was agreed that gains have been made as the first thing, because it's going to be very tough if they say nothing has been achieved. but it's not a very objective report as far as I'm concerned. And I'll say this because when you say that the IDPs are returning back and are being sent back, and where they're sending them to have not been totally rebuilt and all that, it's not the responsibility of the military. There's a plan on ground. There's a Buhari plan. There is a World Bank release of fund. The government is up to the task, and they're doing something about that. I think that effort, or those efforts rather, should be reflected in that report as well. I think it's a little bit biased as far as I'm concerned. And if you go further, because I was just reading it this afternoon, if you go further and they say, oh, okay, the investigative bodies, they're not doing enough, that's not true that they don't have the capacity to do enough. That's not true. The thing is, internally, we've got our own issue that has to do with the judiciary, which we all know that is a national issue. So in view of that, it's a very, very imbalanced report. That's why I can say of that.
How about the allegations that, well, having captured territory,
yes,
the Nigerian military is finding it difficult to hold on to those territories, and therefore the civilian institutions and processes that are supposed to be re-established in those places to make them comfortable for those who are displaced to return cannot be done?
I don't think that would be true as well, because first of all, in military strategy, when a war is going on like this, call it a war, they have their plan already. They know if they don't manage those territories already captured, it's going to be an issue for them. They have to go back there, they have another attack, and they have to use men, they have to use resources and all that. I don't think so. So what I believe is going on has to do with budget, resources. Do the military of this country, do they have enough fund to instantly, as we expect them to do, to rebuild those points? Can they afford it? Do they have the personnel? Do they have enough resources? Do they have enough weaponry? Do they have enough finance, enough budget for them to be able to build up institutions? How many barracks do they intend to build in that place? How many battalions do they intend to position in those points? Those are the things we need to look at. We don't just wake up one day and note that the military will not come out openly and tell you that this is what we're going to do. They will have gone extremely to a level before they come out to the open. So that's the point. So I just want to wake up, and I just even believe that this report on its own is being oversensitized. Because if a report comes up and we are meant to boost the morale of our men, we just come out and be able to pamper the report like this. It's wrong. As far as I'm concerned, if America as a country, if they have military alliance and partnership with certain countries, and in the past, when we needed the help mostly, we never got the help, and now they become analysts on our success. How do you reconcile that? Well,
of course, the report is a public document, so it's possible to analyze.
That's okay.
But coming down to the issue of today, now, the reports had been that, yes, Boko Haram has been decimated, not wiped out, but decimated and so on. They don't have capacity really anymore. But then now there's been this upsurge. Suicide bombings, this latest kidnap of workers and so on. Now, is the military really taking on a battle it can win, given the fact that the insurgents are not fighting a conventional war?
If you listen to the Defense Information General there, it says collaborators of terrorists among us. We should take it this way. There's going to be change of government any moment from now, 2019 precisely. So there's a build-up to that. So you have collaborators. How do you find collaborators? You have them among the politicians, which we know definitely, which some have been accused, tried to be prosecuted, but left off the hook. We know that point of relevance is coming up. Boko Haram on its own, their parts, Shekau angle, Shekau want to prove relevance. So however it is, some negotiation is going on, and girls are being released. On the other hand, whoever is not in the picture want to prove a point. Don't forget that Boko Haram was as a result of metamorphosis of militia group. That was what it was. And used by the politician. So definitely, whatever you see now, this pocket of stuff is proof of relevance. We're there, we still have them, we can still control, we don't want them to be there, we don't want him to be there, and this is who we want. So it's use and dump.
Thank you very much. We're going to have to leave it there, Mr. Wale Olumide. It's a pleasure having you on.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Olumide is a national security analyst. In part two, after the break, AU pledges continued support to Nigeria in the fight against terrorism. Please stay on with us.